Hi, I'm Pierre from Arturia, and today I'm here to present you and go deep with Astrolab. So hopefully I can also demonstrate a bit of more advanced features that you might not have seen already on all the videos that's been out there. And I will also look at the chat and try to answer as many questions as possible. So Astrolab, for those who don't know, Astrolab is our first stage keyboard, which offers all these amazing sounds in a single and simple, very simple instrument that you can carry everywhere when you're playing live. So there's something quite unique about Astrolab, because we really focused on one specific task, which is how to allow people to go live and play all the sounds that they know and love, all the sounds that they are already using in the studio, and how can we make that possible for them to use all these sounds live. So it's not a MIDI keyboard compared to all the keyboards that we've released in the past, but it's making it its own sound, making it possible to go from the studio to the stage, because it's included in our ecosystem of software and hardware products, so it allows you to very easily go from the studio to the stage. I will show you a bit of that, but maybe first to a quick recap of what it can do, because some of you might not have seen everything. So I'll demonstrate a bit of the sounds, and then we'll go into questions. So, of course, when I talk about Astrolab, I always talk about the pianos, because it's something that's central when you make a stage keyboard. So. So the piano sounds nice, but what makes it so unique is that as all our instruments, they are based on physical modeling and they're not using samples. So what that means is that I can control quite deeply the sound of my piano to go from this very soft piano to something much brighter. And the timbre knob is going to be changing the tuning of the strings of the piano, so I can go to a totally out of tune piano. So with all those two macro knobs, I can already have quite a bit of impact on the sound. And the time and the movement macros are also very useful, because it allows you to adjust the dynamics of the sound, to have a soft piano that sounds loud. The movement is going to adjust the stereo width to have a very wide stereo to something more narrow. So we only had the very essential controls that you are needing when you're playing live or when you're rehearsing. And we carefully designed these all macros for all the instruments that are in Astrolab. So here for the Rhodes it's the same. So I can adjust the tone of the piano quite easily, make it sound bright. add some tremolo. Some reverb. So it's just to have the sounds that you need. You already know all these sounds, so you just want to be able to play them and have the most essential controls at your fingertips and not be bothered by too many information displayed at the same time. Of course, we've got an extensive selection of the electric piano, so we've got the clav. We've got the Wurlitzer, so something like that. So all the essential stage keyboard instrument sounds that you need when you're playing live. Of course, we have the organ. So the organ is great. We've got also a Vox organ, which is more. So that's also very nice to have these kind of organs. And we also have a lot of synthetic organs like this one. Quite a vast diversity of sounds. But of course, what makes the Astrolab really unique is all the analog and digital synthesizers that we have built in. So. And so, of course, on the analog synths, you've got control over the brightness, which is the cutoff of the filter, the resonance on the time, and the time is going to control the envelope. And then an LFO on the movement. So with those and the effects, you already have quite a bit of control, and we carefully design the macros to have the best range possible for each of those macros and allow you to have a sound that's super expressive that you can control and focus on your playing. So we've got the mini Moog bass, we've got some nice 808. Of course, we've got also Pigments, so that's something quite amazing, because Pigments is one of the most powerful software synths out there, so you've got these crazy sounds. Amazing. Of course, you've got those nice 80s bass sounds as well. You've got the leads. This one I really like, which is a Prophet. You've got some keys. So we carefully selected all the best sounds that we already had in our collection of instruments, so V Collection, Analog Lab, and Pigments, and we put them as quickly accessible with all those preset buttons. So that's really great when you want to just discover and try a few sounds and understand quickly how to access the sound. So those preset buttons are great for that. But if you need to go deeper and find a specific sound, of course, you're going to be using the screen. So the screen is allowing you to browse by types of sounds, by instruments, by artist tributes. something that most people don't know already is that, for example, I can just select by instruments and select the Jupiter 8. So here I'm going to have... Here I got just a Jupiter patch. But if I want, I can also narrow down my search of a sound. Like, for example, on the Jupiter 8, I only want to see the pads. So I can long press the screen encoder, which is going to allow me to select even further, so I can select pads. So now I've got only pads of the Jupiter. So this is a nice pad. And if I go next, so that's quite handy when you want to actually browse more in depth and you know exactly what kind of sounds you're looking for, so you can go for an instrument and then go for a specific type of sounds. You can also do that by opening an instrument and then long pressing one of the preset buttons. Then it's going to also filter through the these type of sounds in the instrument that you were in. So very handy when you want to find a specific sound. We've got artist tributes, I mentioned that, but that's super nice, and people have been very excited when we've shown that to everybody. So we've got a quite extensive selection of artist tribute sounds. So basically, we looked at all the most famous sounds that are using synths or keyboards heavily, and trying to recreate all these sounds and provide them as part of Astrolab's library, so that people that play in cover bands or people that just want to enjoy and have fun, practice, learn the instruments that the songs that they love, now they have the sounds available. So you've got the Beatles, all these iconic sounds. I'm not gonna play all of them because I'm gonna butcher that, but yeah, quite amazing to be able to play all these tribute sounds. Something that's also very important on Astrolab is the playlists. So of course, when you're performing live, it's super important to have quick access to the controls that to the sounds that you need for your performance. So that's exactly what the playlists are. So that's been a feature of Avant-Garde that we've had for a couple of years now. And it's something that we've pushed, especially because we had in mind the idea to release the Astrolab, and we wanted more people to start using our instruments on stage. So we created those playlists, which are super useful because you can organize your set list into songs, and for each of the song you can have up to 10 presets available at your fingertips. So here I've got a couple of presets, and the preset buttons are loading the different presets of my playlist, and then I can have as many songs as I want on my screen, but I don't need to use the screen during my playlist. I can just use the preset buttons to go through songs and then load any of the presets within a song with those quick access buttons here. So it's very handy when you're playing live. You have the screen to know where you are, but you don't need to use the screen. You can just use the buttons to quickly switch between one preset and another. One preset that's really nice to segue is this one. So here you see my left hand is playing something different than my right hand. That's because it's a split. So splits are super useful when you're playing live, because then you can play something different with your left hand and your right hand. It's also very simple to do it on Astrolab because it's been one of our main focus. So Astrolab, as Analog Lab, is multi-timbral, so you can have two parts playing at the same time. And you can layer them or split them across the keyboard. So that means that I can either I can have a bass sound and put e-piano on top of it. So let's go for this sound. So I hit part 2 and go on the screen to select a preset for my part 2. And now you hear that the bass and the e-piano are playing at the same time. But what I want to do, obviously, is a split. So I want my right hand to play the e-piano and my left hand to play the bass. So I can do that. I just hit the split button and it splits the keyboard. And you can see, if you look at closely at the LEDs, I don't know if it's gonna show on the camera, but the LEDs are showing the color of the part. So which means the green part is my right hand, and the yellow part, which is part 1, is on my left hand. So very simple to combine two sounds. And once you've combined those two sounds, you can quickly control any of the part. For example, I can select part 2, adjust the volume. And if I turn the movement macro, I can quite straightforward to just create your own multi and edit the sounds of your multi instruments. So I think that's mostly what I wanted to show. Maybe I'm gonna get back to it with some of the questions that you guys are asking. But I wanted to first show you as well Astrolab Connect. So Astrolab Connect is the mobile application that comes with Astrolab. So when Astrolab Connect is connected to my Astrolab, then everything that is happening on Astrolab Connect, I can see it on Astrolab as well. So for example, if I select a bass here, it loads the bass instantly on Astrolab. So I can either use that just to browse more efficiently or more quickly with the mobile application, because I've got a big list of presets. I can also filter through instruments like this. So very handy to go a bit quicker and find your sounds. You also have more advanced filtering in the mobile application. So that's quite nice to be able to do that. You also have all the instruments available here, so it's very quick to see all the instruments that you can load. Of course, you've got the playlists. So here on the demo playlists, I can quickly see all the presets that I have in my playlist, but I can also reorder presets of my playlist very easily by just drag and dropping any of the presets. So again, it's just a way to expand the capabilities of the instrument by providing some nice interaction with the mobile application. And finally, something that's also very useful is, for example, here, I've got a bank of user presets, and that's a preset, and I want to change a name of one of my presets. So I can just hit the 3 dots next to the name of the preset, and here you see a menu where I can either add it to a playlist, edit the sound, but something that's very nice is that I can also rename the preset. So that's very useful, because you can do all of this on Astrolab itself, but it's a bit more work to change the name of a preset with the interface, the hardware interface, and it's much more easy to do it on your mobile phone. So all this small interaction between the mobile application and Astrolab makes everything a bit easier with Astrolab. Of course, we have the sound store, so you can go open one of the banks of the sound store and listen to some of the sounds that we added to our sound store to be able to discover more sounds and then add it to the Astrolab by downloading and then installing it on Astrolab. So Astrolab Connect is a lot of fun. You can also edit your sound. So for example, here it's a multi. I have part 1 and part 2, and I can look at some of the parameters of my presets. I can change some macros, but I can also change the EQ, because that can be quite handy. You can adjust the EQ on Astrolab, but it's you have to hold Shift and turn the timbre to change the bass. So it's quite handy to be able to see it at all time on your mobile applications. So that's pretty neat. And maybe I'll check if there are any questions about the mobile application. I don't see any specific question about the mobile application, so maybe I'll get back to that afterwards. Yep. Last thing I wanted to show is the integration with Analog Lab. I'm gonna. So here I'm on Analog Lab, and I wanted to show you a bit of the features to use Analog Lab in combination with Astrolab, and especially when you're in your studio, how you can interact with the hardware, how you can expand the capabilities. So here I'm connected to my Astrolab, and what I have to do, the only thing I have to do is link my Astrolab and my Analog Lab. So as soon as I have linked my Astrolab and Analog Lab, everything that I'm doing on Astrolab or Analog Lab is synchronized. So here, for example, on this sound. So here I have a bass preset, and I can, if I turn the macro on Astrolab, you see it also turns on Analog Lab. So that's cool. But something that's even cooler is that I can load any of the presets of Analog Lab, any of the 3000 presets of Analog Lab, and it loads the sound immediately on Astrolab. So what maybe I need to precise here is that Astrolab here is making all the sounds. So you don't need to listen to Analog Lab. Analog Lab is also generating the same sound as Astrolab, but right now you're listening to the sound of Astrolab. And Analog Lab is just used as a library manager, basically. So you can load any of the presets of Analog Lab and have it loaded instantly on Astrolab. So that's super cool. But whenever I've got a preset that I really like, in case it wasn't already on Astrolab's library, I can just select my preset, drag and drop it on Astrolab's library, and then it starts sending it to Astrolab. And as soon as it's on Astrolab, I can go away of the studio and I can perform live with it. It's the same with the playlist. So here on Astrolab library, you see Astrolab's playlists. So I can organize my playlist, but I can also drag and drop any presets from Analog Lab to Astrolab's playlist. So that's a very, very convenient way to organize your playlist. It's going to be much faster than any other workflow. So that's something that's super powerful. So yeah, Analog Lab is super powerful, and it's very nice to be able to send all your presets to Astrolab instantly. For example, something that's quite common to do in Analog Lab is to change some of the sounds to create your own. So I'm gonna show you a couple of examples. So bear in mind that that's what I'm gonna do is only possible if you own one of the instruments. So Astrolab is really meant for performance. So it's something that's it's an instrument where we have thousands of sounds, and you have the macros and the effects that you can edit quite in depth. But you don't have access to all the parameters of all the 30 instruments, because that would be quite a lot to comprehend from the get-go. But all these parameters, they can be edited in Analog Lab. So the way you do that is when you own one of the instruments of the collection, you can open the instruments from Analog Lab, and then the instrument is gonna open, and you can adjust all the parameters of the instruments. Let me just go on a different track, because something that's quite important to know is that in order for you to hear all the changes that you make on those parameters, you need to listen to Analog Lab, because right now the parameters of the instruments themselves are not synchronized in real time, and you need to save the presets to be able to listen to the changes that you've made. So now I'm doing the opposite of what I was doing before. I am playing on Astrolab, but Astrolab is not making any sound. I cut the master volume, and instead it's Analog Lab that's making sound. So then I'm using Astrolab more as a MIDI controller. So here I can open the Juno. I can adjust. I can adjust all the parameters. I can add some sub. I can add some LFO. So once I've done that, if I'm happy, I can just save the preset, and I can save it in my user library, and then I will be able to send this preset to Astrolab. So if I do that, I take my preset and I drag and drop it again to my library of Astrolab, and then I can access it at any time. Something that's also very useful to do, for example, is editing all the macros. So the macros have been like very carefully designed by our sound designers. So they are very powerful, but sometimes for a performance, you need to do something very specific. You have a very specific need. For example, something you could do is using the macros to control the attack, the decay, and the sustain and the release of the envelope. Let's take this Juno preset, for example. So here, my macros are controlling the brightness, the timbre, the time, and the movement. But let's say I want to do something else with those. So I can open the settings within Analog, and I go on the macro page. And here I can, on the learn, I can hit learn and assign a different parameter to my brightness. Quite straightforward, but you can quickly assign your macro like that to all the parameters of the instrument. Just need to remove the older ones. So for all the macros, you can do that for all the envelopes parameters. So it's quite easy to create your own custom macros to be able to have the specific parameters available at your fingertips when you're preparing for your own performance. And last but not least, what I wanted to show you is a bit of how it can be used in a DAW to create your own track. So, for example, if we now I'm again listening to Astrolab. So I'm in Ableton Live, but what I want to do is record some of my ideas. So I've got a drum loop that I recorded, that a friend of mine recorded, and I want to record something on top of that. So the way I'm gonna do that is I can use the Astrolab to find some presets. So I can jam with the drum track, and then as soon as I'm ready, I can record. So now I just recorded a bass line for my track, and now I want to add something else to the mix. So for example, I can start by adding a Rhodes. So the only thing I need to do is I go to another Analog Lab track in my DAW, and I link to it, and now my Astrolab is actually playing the Rhodes. So same, I can record. Okay, and I can do that, and I can continue doing exactly the same thing for all the tracks in my song. So I can go to a third track. So I can record some lead. and so and so and so. So basically, you've got all the benefits of having a MIDI controller where you have the flexibility of being able to record in MIDI and have as many Analog Lab instances as you want. But when you want to play live, you just take those sounds, you drag and drop all these sounds on Astrolab, and you're good to go and you can play live with it. So I think I've gone through everything that I wanted to show. Maybe let's look at some of the questions. Maybe let's first start by some of the questions that I saw on the social networks and on the videos that I've seen. So first of all, it was quite amazing to see everybody's reaction. I think people were really excited by the product, and there's been a lot of questions about people wondering about some of the features, whether it was a product that was for them and everything. So I'm gonna try to answer some of these questions. One of the first questions, I already kind of answered it, but is Astrolab sample-based? And so no, it's not sample-based. As I mentioned, it's using either physical modeling or circuit modeling or any kind of synthesis, especially Pigments has a lot of different kinds of synthesis. But compared to other stage keyboards, which are heavily relying on sample playback, here we are fully creating the sound from scratch. And that's good because you've got a lot of control. Their sounds are very dynamic, they are very organic, and they can evolve quite a lot. But it also has an impact because they are quite demanding. Those instruments are quite heavy on the CPU, so which is gonna have an effect on how many voices of polyphony we can have. So there's been a lot of questions about what are the limitations of Astrolab, and some of the limitations are the amount of polyphony, which depends on the instruments that we have on Astrolab. So the pianos have a lot of polyphony because they have 48 voices of polyphony, but for example, the analog synths, most of them have 8 voices of polyphony, which is enough for most playing style, but for some people it might not be enough. But that's something that comes with the decision of having those high quality emulations of the vintage analog synthesizers. This comes with a cost, so it's a compromise that we had to do, and I think yeah, everybody that's gonna try the Astrolab are gonna perceive how good it sounds and understand why it has to have these kind of limitations. Another question was, does Astrolab operate solely as a controller, or is it a fully standalone instrument? And another similar question was, is it able to control DAW? So first of all, Astrolab is not a MIDI controller, it's a fully standalone instrument, but it can be used as a standard MIDI controller, which means it's gonna send notes when you play MIDI notes, and it's also gonna send MIDI CCs when you turn the mod wheel, the pitch bend, and the knob. So that means that you can use it to control a DAW, but you would have to map the knobs yourself if you wanted to do something with the DAW. But you can play any instruments that supports MIDI, and you can use the MIDI CCs the way you would want. So it's really focused on being an instrument, and we tried not to add too many features of a MIDI keyboard. I think if people want to have a MIDI keyboard, if people need a MIDI keyboard, we already have the keylabs and they're great, and we didn't try to replace the MIDI keyboards, but it is a standard MIDI keyboard, so you can use it if you don't have specific needs. You can still use it as a MIDI keyboard in your studio. And it works perfectly with Analog Lab, which is super important. Yeah, another very good question that's been asked quite a lot is, how can you use the audio inputs? So we've got 2 audio inputs in the back panel here. And I see mainly two ways to use those inputs. So to demonstrate that, I'm gonna load a preset from my user bank. So obviously, if I take a microphone, obviously we have the vocoder. So that's the obvious use of the stereo microphone, is to be able to use with a vocoder that we have in V Collections. That's very exciting, because that's something that people have been asking for quite a while, to have a keyboard that has this quality of vocoding, but something that's also less common. So this is a multi with a piano, so I can either play the piano, but I can also put my voice in it, and I can go through the effects. So the way I'm doing that is basically this preset is using the vocoder, but the vocoder is bypassed, and I'm going through the effects after the vocoder. So that's very handy, because I can just go on a gig with only Astrolab and a microphone, and I can use the outputs of the Astrolab straight without having to connect to a mixer, an external mixer. I have onboard effects, so it's not the main purpose of Astrolab, but it's quite handy to be able to do that. Yeah, another question is, can you add control via MIDI? Something that was kind of linked is what are the decisions? Oh yeah. What are the decisions that lead us to decide on how many controls we have on the interface? So we really tried with Astrolab to have an instrument that is as simple as possible to understand from a first point of view, that anybody can quickly understand, quickly master. And that's come with a lot of experience working especially on Analog and our keyboard MIDI controllers. So on Analog and Keylabs, we've put a lot of effort into making it better integrated and optimizing the way people are making music with a MIDI controller and Analog, and we've seen that a lot of most of the time people don't need that much control over the sound, and so we have worked on these 4 macros for a couple of years now to be able to control the most important parameters of each of the sounds of the collection, and we felt like on Astrolab it was more than enough to perform and to be able to find inspiration quickly and without being overwhelmed by more controls. Now, I totally understand that a lot of people want to have more control over the sound, especially when they're playing live. Sometimes they want to have faders to control some volumes of some of the tracks, to be able as well for organ players. It's nice to be able to assign drawbars to a fader, to have the faders controlling the drawbars of the organ. So you can do that by connecting, for example, any MIDI controller, but one good example is connecting a Keylab. So I don't have it right now, but if I connect a Keylab on top of my Astrolab, I can both play the Astrolab with my Astrolab keyboard or with the Keylab on top of it, but the faders on the Astrolab are going to control some of the parameters of the Astrolab. And let me show you very quickly what that means. Is that on Analog Lab, you can display additional controls on top of the macros and effects knobs that you have on Astrolab. Here you can see that I have a few faders, and those faders are generally controlling either the envelopes of the synths, or on the organs, it's going to be assigned to the drawbars. So whenever I'm connecting my Keylab to Astrolab, the MIDI CCs sent by the Keylab are going to be understood by Astrolab, and you're going to be able to control those faders. So that's quite handy. The way you do that, the way you see those faders in Analog Lab is quite easy. So by default, on Analog Lab, you're going to have this layout, but in the MIDI settings, you can decide to show the faders by clicking the Generate 9 knobs and faders. So once you've done that, you have access to those faders, and if you want, you can change what those faders are doing. And again, if you own the instruments, you can even assign all those faders to specific parameters of the instruments. So very powerful feature. It's a bit more advanced, of course, but if you have a fader controller, you can assign all those parameters to your faders. Okay, let's get to some other questions. How suitable Astrolab is for use in a studio or a home setup? I have some other questions. Is Astrolab designed primarily for studio producers, live performers, or both? Is Astrolab suitable for sound design purposes? So really at the core, Astrolab is a stage keyboard. So all the decisions that we made about the product was to be able to have a keyboard that you can carry live, have all these sounds that we know and love from V-Collection and Pigments, and be able to perform without any stress, without having a computer, without having too many controls, too many things that can go wrong. So that was really the main purpose. Now, it's also working in the studio, and it's actually really nice to be used in the studio. It's not specifically meant for that, but personally, I also use it in the studio as my main MIDI controller, and the interaction with Analog is also great. So for people that need to do both studio work and be able to play live, this makes complete sense. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend Astrolab to someone who's only playing in the studio, because if you don't need to play live, you might be completely fine with using a keylab, and that's fine. And that's it's much cheaper. You don't have exactly the same features, but it's also a very nice integration with Analog, and it works perfectly well in a DAW. So it really depends on what are your primary needs. If you need to perform now and then, Astrolab might be the right keyboard for you. If you don't ever perform live, it might be better to use a keylab. So that would be entirely up to you. And concerning sound design purposes, I think I demonstrated a bit already, but really if you want to do a lot of deep edition of sound design, you're not going to do it on the hardware, but you can do everything that you wish you could do in Analog when you own the V-Collection instruments. So that's the important part. You need to own the instruments to be able to edit all the parameters in depth, but once you own them, you can pretty much change everything about the instrument. Yeah, another question was about the pricing. So, and I think it's kind of linked to the question of whether it is for the studio or not for the studio. So, and other question was whether V-Collection and Pigments was included. So, the pricing is really something that we try to keep as low as possible. At Arturia, we always try to have the most affordable keyboards and products for the feature sets that we can have. But you have to compare Astrolab to what it is actually trying to do. And here we are comparing to stage keyboard. And in general, stage keyboards can be quite expensive. And that's got a reason, because it takes a lot of power, a lot of CPU to run all these instruments, and so it's very costly to run all these instruments on a hardware keyboard. And we also made a lot of decisions which are more on the premium side. So the quality of all the components is very high. So it also comes with a cost. So the costs that you have on Astrolab is something that's quite normal in this kind of products, and we really wanted to target stage keyboard players which have specific needs in terms of quality, and we wanted to have a perfect sound, so we made no compromise on that, which ends up having a price point of $15.99. And whether Pigments and V-Collection are included or not, it's kind of the same. So V-Collection and Pigments are not included, and that's because we felt like a lot of the people that would be interested in Astrolab would already have V-Collection, And we wanted first to make sure that the Astrolab would be as affordable as possible for them. And so that's why we couldn't afford to add V collection and pigments to the package, because it's V collection and pigments are quite premium instruments and bundles, and in total they cost around $800, and it would have had quite a significant cost if we wanted to add all this on top of Astrolab. So we wanted to separate the two to make sure that both people that already own the V collection and pigments and people that don't own it have a price that's fair to them. But of course, we want everybody to be able to edit the sounds in depth if they need to edit the sound in depth. So we are working on an upgrade price, which should be very attractive to all the people that own an Astrolab to be able to upgrade to V collection and to pigments, because we don't want anybody to be frustrated because they can't do the sound design they want to do. Another question was about updates. So, will updates be available for Astrolab, include future plugin releases? Yes, and that's going to come quite soon, because for now Astrolab only has the instruments of V collection that are running, V collection 9 that are running inside that. So that means some of the instruments of V collection 10, the new instruments of V collection 10 are not accessible. For example, Acid V is not here, the CP70 is not here yet. But we are planning an update very soon that should bring all these new instruments to Astrolab. And as we are making V collection and Analog Lab and pigments evolve, there's going to be a lot of updates in the next months, in the next years, and we're going to keep updating Astrolab to add all of these instruments that we add on Astrolab. So that's going to be something that's very important to us, to keep it updated, and that's quite unique for a stage keyboard as well, to have this amount of expandability. Another question was whether the sound quality was better or worse than Analog Lab, and my only answer is that it's pretty much the same, depending on what kind of audio interface you own. If you own a cheap audio interface, Astrolab is probably going to sound better than your audio interface when you have in using Analog Lab. And if you have a very high-end audio interface, it might sound slightly better, but basically we have the same audio quality as any standard audio interface that you would find in the market. So it's high-quality sound, and the sound of the engines themselves are the same than the sound of Analog Lab. So you can record a project with Analog Lab in your studio and play it live, and it doesn't make any difference. The sound is the same. And the opposite, you can rehearse and practice with your Astrolab, find a sound that you really like, load the same sound on Analog Lab, and it's going to sound exactly the same. So that's one of the big advantage of having Astrolab and Analog Lab. Another question is whether about the encoder, so the navigation wheel. So basically, we have this navigation wheel, which is very handy to navigate through your presets. And some people are concerned about the feel and the quality and the durability. So basically, it's very durable because we've put a lot of effort into making a design that doesn't have any friction. So the way it's happening, you don't have any friction. So there is no component that's gonna get damaged the more you turn it. So the wheel should be very, very durable, actually. And one of the last questions was about the latency. So latency is super important when you're playing a live instrument. So most of the stage keyboards have almost no latency. It can depend, but at least it's not a latency that you can perceive so we've been very strict with Astrolab, and we've put a lot of effort into reducing all the latency of our system, and now it's really something that's most people can't perceive at all. So we have around 6 milliseconds of latency, which most people are not able to notice at all. So it's a very nice thing about Astrolab is compared to using it in a DAW, you have zero latency perceivable. So which means like if you're in a DAW, you can record everything with zero latency with Astrolab. But if you are having a big project, then you can have a buffer size of as much as you want. You can have as much latency in your DAW because you can save then some of the CPU power of your computer, but still have zero latency on your Astrolab, which is super comfortable. Another question was about polyphonic Aftertouch and MP. So we don't have polyphonic Aftertouch, we have channel Aftertouch, so you can have a sound like that. So you can have these really nice expressive presets with Aftertouch, but it's not polyphonic. Yeah, the reason for that is mostly because it can be quite pricey to add this kind of feature on a keyboard like that, and it's not necessarily a feature that's been needed by stage keyboard players in general. Maybe in the future that's going to change because there's been more and more polyphonic Aftertouch keyboards, but for now it's not something that people have been asking so much about that. And yeah, finally, maybe the last questions that I saw from the social media was, will you make a different color scheme for the side panel? But maybe also, are there going to be other colors? So no, for now, Astrolab is only in one color. It's beautiful like that. It's white with brown sides. As with most of our keyboards, we don't know in the next couple of years we might release some special editions, but we really wanted to have this iconic design that people can understand and people can see from far, and we're really happy about this design. So I don't think we are gonna have another version soon. So maybe let's look at some of the questions that you guys asked for now, if we still have some time. Yeah. Oh, so question, how high is the probability of such a device crashing during live event? Could also Astrolab CPU crash during live event in theory? So no, it shouldn't in theory. That's exactly why we design Astrolab. So basically, we have full control over what's happening on these instruments. So it's not as if you were using a computer, because you don't have the full OS that runs as it would on the computer. So that was one of the biggest reason why we decided to work on Astrolab. It's super reliable, and there's no reason for it to crash because we have full control over all the sounds and all the engines of Astrolab. So you should be confident. Native Instruments seems to hesitate to go towards such a concept. Why did Arturia do? Not afraid of the CPU being outdated in 5 years' time. I don't know exactly what Native Instruments' plans are. For sure, it could be interesting for them to have the same kind of keyboard embedding all of their instruments. For us, it's always been something quite important. It's been a dream for, I would say, probably 10 years at Arturia to have a keyboard with all the instruments that we have. We already kind of realized this dream with Origin a while back. Astrolab is a different approach to this whole concept, but working on Astrolab was very challenging project, but we really wanted to have more and more people playing live with our instruments, and we felt like they deserve to have an instrument that's easy, simple to use, and that's also showing all the quality of the sounds that we have released for the past 25 years. About the CPU being outdated in 5 year times, the CPU is not going to be outdated. We are going to make a lot of effort not to create instruments that are super demanding. So that's our priority, to work on optimizing, making sure that we keep a level of CPU that's acceptable for Astrolab. So since we only have our instruments, we have full control over how we handle the polyphony, how we create new instruments and make sure they are still running on Astrolab. So we can make sure that in 5 years, all the instruments that we have released in V Collection will still run on Astrolab. So that's one of the priority for us in the next couple of years, is to make sure that we always think about Astrolab and make sure that all the instruments that we work on will be available in Astrolab. Oh, very curious to know why the mellotron isn't part of the instruments V Collection, despite being included in V Collection. So it's not something I can disclose really, but for some reason we weren't allowed to use the mellotron V in Astrolab, but we put a lot of effort into recreating all the sounds, all the iconic sounds of the mellotron. As I showed you, the Beatles. So this one is using the one instrument, which is the sampler. So the sampler is basically a multi-sample engine that we created for Astrolab, and where we have a lot of different sounds, which are kind of sounds that we didn't have before in Analog Lab and in V Collection, and that people might need when they're playing live. So very simple sounds like marimba, and we also recreated all the iconic sounds of the mellotron. So you don't have the mellotron V, but the most important sounds of the mellotron V are accessible here. They're just part of the sampler. So I hope it's going to be enough for most people. So not all V Collection is available. Yes, so we only have V Collection 9 for now, and we are working hard to release an update which is going to have all the instruments of V Collection 10. So can you explain what functionality is added compared to using a keylab with a laptop? So really, again, that's all boils down to what this instrument is. It is meant to be a stage keyboard for the at the core. So the main purpose is to be able to not have a computer, because a lot of things can go wrong when you carry a computer on stage. You can hit it, it can disconnect the cables, you can have someone steal it in between two sets. So people are very scared about using computers on stage. Now, some people are completely fine using computer on stage. I've seen people using main stage in big stages, and some people, when they are really highly professional, they are going to have multiple computers, and they're going to switch between two computers when there is a crash on one of the computers. So some people are using computers on stage anyways, but it's more because they can't find the sounds, or they can't have all the features that they need on the keyboard, rather than just because they want to use a computer. So most of the people that play live, they don't want to have a computer on stage. So that's the main added functionality of Astrolab compared to using it with a keylab. Now, there are also small improvements or small things that are very nice on Astrolab compared to using a keylab. For example, the LEDs around the knobs are very nice. It's super easy to understand what's happening. The LEDs with the playlists are very handy as well. You quickly understand where you are. So it's, in general, there's a lot of visual feedback on what's happening in between Analog Lab and Astrolab. So it's very nice to use it as a controller as well. And the screen is also very nice when you're controlling Analog Lab. But in general, I wouldn't say like it's more powerful as a MIDI controller as a keylab, for example. So the main thing I see is the fact that it's a standalone. I see there's a lot of questions, so I'm probably gonna need to go a bit quicker. When will some of the collection is? So as I said, we are really working really hard. We don't have a specific date, but it should be in the upcoming months. Mellotron Q, again, I already talked about that. Yeah, could I reduce the choices when I'm on stage? So I guess that's the choices of sound. So as I showed you, if I activate the playlist mode, here I just have the presets that I loaded for my playlist. So that's very handy when you are playing live. You just have the sounds that you need for your performance. So again, I think I kind of answered that, but some questions about the polyphony. Some competitors have 128 voices of polyphony. So we could have 128 voices of polyphony, or roughly, if we were using only sample playback, as all those most of those stage keyboards do. Now, the instruments that we have in Astrolab are quite heavy on the CPU, and they are quite demanding, which is why we have to limit. But for example, as I mentioned, you have the sampler, and some of the, if I take some of the sampler presets, for example, let's take a preset that has a lot of polyphony. Yeah, this one. So on this preset, for example, there is not really any limit of the polyphony. So it really depends on what kind of sounds you're using. So if you're using a preset which is very demanding on the CPU, yes, we are gonna limit the polyphony. If you're using one of the sampler presets, then you can have more than 64 voices of polyphony. I don't know the exact number here on this preset, but you can have quite an extensive polyphony. So it really depends on the kind of instruments, and it's kind of a choice that we did, that we didn't want to sacrifice the sound quality. So we wanted to have a keyboard that's affordable, convenient, simple, with all those sounds that we already are using in the studio, and that comes with some limitations. Double bass and electric bass sounds. It does. It's not the first sounds. So we've got. So it's not acoustic. It's not acoustic electric bass, but we have emulations of electric bass using either the DX7 or the emulator. So you have this kind of sound. It can be quite useful to have those, and we have augmented strings where we have some of those double bass sounds. Let me see if I find it. Be a bit hidden. Up. Acoustic bass. So it's part of the augmented series. It's quite specific. So acoustic series, acoustic strings are really meant more for the cinematic strings and sounds, but it also offers this kind of simple acoustic sounds. So you can actually have these acoustic bass sounds. Is it possible to change and save different tempo for songs in the playlists? Thank you. It is possible to it's a bit tricky to do, but you should be able in the playlist to adjust the tempo. So the tempo is here, and the tempo can be saved per preset. So in a playlist, you should be able to change the tempo per preset. That should be doable. Can the EQ be adjusted? Yes. So it's shift plus bass plus timbre or time of movement. So yeah, you can adjust the EQ. Should So as I understand, most of the preset edition has to be made in V Collection. Any plans to get some additional tweaking capabilities from the app? That's a very good question. Like a V Collection editor tool. Yeah, so the app is super exciting. It's kind of a first for us, so it's a first step for us to be able to control a keyboard with the mobile applications, and we are not going to stop there. So yes, it's in the plans to expand the capabilities of the mobile app. I can't share you the details of what we're going to add, but for sure, being able to edit some more parameters of the instrument with the mobile application is something that we would all love to have. So that's something that we are going to work on, and I think it's really going to expand the capabilities of the instruments quite a lot. So how does the drums and rhythm feature works as standalone solo in all instruments? So regarding drums, so we didn't put too much emphasis on drums. So we are able to have drum loops or drum hits or drum kits on Astrolab. It's not something that we really pushed too much because we wanted to focus on keyboard sounds. But some people might need to have drum loops. So for example, that's CMI. So the CMI is a sampler, and the CMI you can edit your own drum loops, and you can create drum sequences. Maybe I can actually show you. So here I've got the CMI open, and here it's quite a powerful and intimidating software. But basically, you have a sequencer here, and you can basically write any of your sequence straight from the CMI. You can save it, but as I said, once you do that, you need to save the presets and then send it again. So as a standalone, you're not going to be able to control your sequencer. You're not going to be able to write sequences. You're not going to be able to write drum loops from the hardware itself. You will need to use Analog to do this. Yeah, question is whether we are combining the polyphony between the two parts. So we have two parts. It's multi-timbral. We have part 1 and part 2. One of the questions was whether we would have more polyphony if we had only one part compared to the 48 voices of polyphony. So for now, it's not something that's possible. The two parts are basically independent, so you can't really share the voices between the two engines. Yeah, so can you play Acid V, for example, on Astrolab when just using it as a MIDI controller? Yes, you can. So if I open Analog Lab and I listen to, the only thing is that I won't be able to send the preset, but I can load a preset of the Acid V inside Analog Lab. I can adjust it, but it's not gonna. I won't be able to send it to Astrolab basically. And as soon as I link it, the presets that are not compatible are gonna be grayed out. So if I link my Astrolab, it should display that it's not possible to send it. So yeah. You can use the new instruments as the MIDI controller, but you will have to wait for the updates to be able to send them to Astrolab, basically. Any plans to add DAW control to it? So as I said, since Astrolab is stage keyboard, we didn't focus too much on DAW integration. Now it's working. It's using a lot of. It's based on software, and there's a lot of things that we can change. about how Astrolab is designed. So having some very simple door control is definitely something that we could add in the future. We'll see how many people are asking for that, but definitely it's something that could be quite useful, especially to be able to play or record a loop from your DAW instead of using the onboard looper. A question about the boot time, the startup time. So it takes a couple of seconds to start. I would say it's around between 10 and 12 seconds to start. It's not the end of the world, but it takes a couple of seconds to start. Why not metallophones and gamelons? Why not? It's probably something that can come in the future, especially we have more and more acoustic sounds thanks to augmented series. So it's the kind of sounds that we might be looking into adding in the future. How many effects chains? So the effects chain is really simple, at least the effects that are accessible from Astrolab. So you've got 2 insert effects, and then a delay and a reverb. So the effect chain is quite simple. Now, for example, if I was using Pigments presets, I could also use the effects within Pigments, which are not the effects of Analog Lab. Maybe to show a bit of that, basically the effects that you have here are displayed here in Analog Lab. So you've got those 4 effects. Those are the ones that you have hands-on control. But if I open the Juno and I go into the advanced view, I also have the effects of the Juno accessible here. That's maybe not the best example because the Juno doesn't have that many effects, but for example, Pigments, you can have quite an extensive amount of effects in Pigments FX chain. So you're gonna add the Analog Lab effects on top of the instrument effects, right? Hello, I'm a worship keyboard player. The community is super Nord supporters. Can Astrolab compete in this market? I think it can, and hopefully it will, because I think the kind of sounds that we have in Astrolab are very interesting for people in house of worship, especially the synths. I think synth pads like this one, which are and the fact it's so simple to use and so quick to have these more modern, more evolving, more creative sounds, I think it makes quite a perfect tool for people that want to play worship. Of course, and I think the Astrolab is ideal when it's used as part of a 2 keyboard setup. So for example, some people might have 88 hammer action for playing the pianos, and you can put your Astrolab on top, and then you would be able to play pretty much anything from pianos, pianos with pads, all these kind of sounds. Are we planning on having a rack mount or a desktop version? So it's not planned. We'll see if there is demand. We really wanted to focus on making an instrument, and it really makes sense. The instrument really makes sense when you can actually play the keys, and the knobs feel really great. So we felt like it was better to make a full instrument with it. But let's see how people react to that. And I think I've gone through all the questions, and I think it's time to end this. So thanks a lot for watching this. I hope I could answer most of your questions. I'm always happy to see how people are reacting to these live streams. So thanks again for watching, and I hope you're gonna have fun discovering and trying Astrolab in one of the stores. All right. See you.